the profession. But if we have any questions or anything, we'll just jump in and maybe have a little bit more in-depth talk about what we have. So if you guys don't know why you're here today, good work. But we're here to talk about gratitude, and specifically gratitude in the classroom, and jump back and forth between these different seats here. But what's interesting to me is I've done gratitude research, so I guess I should introduce myself, since I think I know both of you, but I haven't seen Heidi in a long time. So hi, Heidi. My name is Doug Cruthirds. I used to be faculty here at LCSC in the business division. I am now the director of workforce training way out in North Lewiston. My background academically is actually in psychology, and my PhD is in experimental psychology. So I'm a math guy who couldn't be good enough in math, and so went down a different path. My research focus, come on in. During my PhD, actually, so my research focus switched a whole lot while I went through my PhD and my undergrad. If any of you were still around when Dan Mayton was here, he was my professor here at LCSC, and Dan was very focused on positive psychology, along with Rhett Diesner. Funny enough, when I first got into that, I thought it was the biggest crap I'd ever heard in my entire life, and made fun of Dan and Rhett a whole lot for it. By the time I finished my degree, I actually saw some use in it, and then finished my PhD in positive psychology in a way. So, but what I ended up doing for research was looking at gratitude, specifically gratitude, and I looked at it a couple of different ways. The way that I ended up looking at it was how we actually experience gratitude and how we can help others experience gratitude. Now, that may sound like what I'm trying to do is trying to make you a more grateful person, and that's exactly the opposite. And we'll talk about that here a little bit when we get a little bit further into the research. So the one thing that I want to throw, so that's a little bit about me, a little bit about the talk. The one thing that I want to talk about, and I think it's sometimes thrown off, is that this is not going to be one of those talks where you leave and you're suddenly a more grateful person. I think that is one of the things that is the most overrated thought about well-being, gratitude, and positive psychology in general, is there's not one sentence or phrase, and I'm going to say that's something going to make you more grateful and a better and happier person. It's work. In order to be more grateful, in order to find more gratitude within your life, you actually have to make an effort to start that. So when we take this into one next step further and say, well, how do we have gratitude in the classroom? A big part of that is us. A big part of that is modeling our gratitude behavior and getting that out to our students who may or may not be super grateful to begin with. And so the one thing that I want to point out is that there is not one silver bullet that's going to make your classroom more grateful. In fact, there's not one thing that you can probably do as an instructor that's going to help every one of your students. But if everybody in LCSC took in a couple of things and made it their own personal mission to be a little bit more grateful and to look at the world through a grateful lens, we maybe would see a little bit more improvement. So a little bit about me, my one-step statement that this is not going to just walk out of here and you're suddenly going to be more happy and more grateful. You may be a little bit more, but that's not going to be the intention of this. So let's dive in. When we think about gratitude, of course, as academics, the one thing that we love about everything is we have to define, right? We have to define what we're looking at. And gratitude has a lot of different definitions that are out there. I like to use the definition that I used in my dissertation. I worked on it for a long time, which is one of the reasons I like to use it. But it also highlights a few of the different areas of gratitude that we are going to talk about today. So in general, gratitude is a positive emotion marked by a deep sense of appreciation and thankfulness for kindness, help, or a positive experience received from others, as well as good things in life in general. It involves recognizing and valuing these blessings and contributions to enhance your well-being and positive relationships. And so to break this down a little bit, and I'm going to try to use the board back here to kind of think about this, is the first thing we have to have is a deep sense of appreciation. I can't spell, so just deal. The next thing that we have to have, and I think this is where things start to get a little bit off for people in general, is recognition. That someone has gone out of their way to do something good for you. A lot of times this is where this starts to break down, because someone may have done something nice for you, and I think a very easy explanation is holding the door open, right? people don't have to hold the door open for you, but most of the time that actually helps you. You don't have to grab the door. You don't have to hold it open. We're not saying that that is a very large thing that's going to break your day if someone doesn't hold the door open for you, or make your day because someone held the door open for you. But if you don't recognize that someone held the door open for you and you just walk through, you're not grateful for that, because it may also, one, happen so commonplace that you forget to be grateful for something like that. And that's part of what we kind of talk about today is finding those times to be grateful. But the second is that if there's no recognition from that person, then there's no gratitude. And then the last one is valuing. And so to go back to our idea of a person holding the door open for another, there may not be any recognition. You may also not value that. Someone holding the door open for you may not be a big deal to you. And so if you don't value that person's time, and really that's what a lot of this comes down to, is someone spending their time on you versus spending their time on someone else, right? Or something else. And so if you don't value that, we don't have this deep sense of appreciation. We don't have we don't recognize that that has happened. We don't have that deep sense of appreciation. The gratitude isn't going to happen. And so one of the things that we pull out from this is that we may notice that all of this is actually derived from that other person. There is very little that we can do as somebody to make someone recognize that I'm giving you my time and you need to recognize it. I'm a parent, and I can also tell you that it's hard to make people value your time. I yell at my 8-year-old all the time. I just picked up your room for 30 minutes. What did you do? Play video games? That's 30 minutes of my valuable time. How hard is it to actually get people to come out and value that, right? And so sometimes what ends up happening with gratitude, and this is one of the things that we have to be aware for, especially if we're trying to build it in our classroom, is that on the other side of gratitude is the dirty word called obligation. And gratitude and obligation are exactly the same, except for one thing. I owe you. Obligation is the idea that I'm grateful for this, but at the end of the day, I feel that I have to re-give you something back. Okay? That is a different state than feeling grateful for somebody. In fact, when we start to look at the research, if we start to feel obligated, all of those good positive emotions that we get from gratitude, which I realize we have not talked about some of those yet, but we will, a lot of those disappear. Once we feel that we owe something to somebody, it is no longer a deep sense of appreciation, even if we recognized and valued it. Now we may be appreciative for it, but we now feel like we owe them something back. Okay, so one of the big things that we try to eliminate while we go through and try to help our students and ourselves build gratitude is that we try to avoid things like, well, I did that for you. Well, didn't you know I took that assignment in late just for you, right? If we have to tell somebody why they're grateful, they're not going to be grateful. That's kind of the rule of thumb. If they don't know it on their own, it's hard for us to get them to understand it without going into this scary area of obligation. And so just to define that so that we know what we're talking about there, obligation refers to a sense of duty or responsibility or a fulfillment or a need to fulfill a commitment. An expectation, or one of the words we bring up a whole lot, is the social contract, right? So I feel that you have done something for me, and now socially I'm obligated to do something back to you, okay? We see this a lot going back to my door opening. Have you guys ever been caught in that 2 doors or 3 doors? I open the door for you, then that person opens the door for me, then I'm opening the door for them. We kind of lose the whole idea of what we opened the door for in the first place when we start doing that, right? So really, if we can, we just need to try to avoid that slip into obligation. So now that we know a little bit about what we're worried about and what we are trying to do, what good comes of gratitude? Because really, if we're trying to build it in somebody or trying to build it in our students or first off in ourselves, we need to know why. Well, there is a lot of good research out there that tells us why we should like gratitude. It started way before this, but in the early 2000s, gratitude research and positive psychology in general really took off. And so lots of research started to be done in this area. In fact, some of the key people in our area, actually, one of them is from Eastern Washington University. And then there's another one from UW, who are some of the largest facilitators in gratitude and positive psychology, I guess, in general. What we see consistently with replication, I know psychology has our replication issues, but we see this pretty consistently and through most of the studies that are conducted, is that an increase in gratitude leads to an increase in subjective well-being. Now, of course, there are some caveats to this, right? It doesn't always mean that they're going to go up. We just tend to see this more often. And the one thing that is very important here, especially for anyone else who may have studied this area, is subjective well-being. This is how I report I'm feeling about myself, right? So it is a self-report. There is not really any, there is the PANIS that is done on this, which is positive and negative affect scale. But that's still a self-report. And so one of the downsides of this, right? But we also tend to see when some of these have been replicated is that if we look for social and behavioral markers of happiness, we tend to see those increase as well. So not just saying that I feel happy, but actually smiling more or giving more indicators of positive feelings. One of the other ones we see, if we see an increase in gratitude, we see an increase in physical health. Oh, hell. One of the neat things about this is that not just in the health benefits, but people tend to report less symptoms, so less health symptoms. They also tend to exercise more. If people are more grateful, even if they've built that gratitude up, we also see a nice increase with their outdoor, usually they go outdoor more and want to be out more. And so we see an increase of their exercise or their general physical fitness. And lastly, with the gratitude increase, we also see an increase in mood. So typically, if we're more of a grateful person, we typically happen to be in more positive moods. And what some of the more recent research has found is that people who have higher levels of gratitude are actually able to pull themselves out of bad moods at a higher or faster rate, however you want to kind of quantify that in your head. They're able to out maneuver their bad mood quicker than somebody who has less gratitude. We also see an increase in interpersonal relationships, which in our classes could be very important. And one of the things that we'll talk about some of the things about what we can do in our classroom to build gratitude is having people work together. And so as we have people work together and build in some of these gratitude ideas, we actually hopefully have them continue to want to work together and build on a spiral. A lot of this stuff and through a lot of this research, we end up talking about what is a upward spiral of gratitude. And so what we end up seeing a lot of times is that as people start to become more grateful, they start to discover reasons to become more grateful. As they start to discover more reasons to become more grateful, they become happier. As they start to become happier, they find more reasons to become more grateful, and so on and so forth. And so these levels kind of build on each other. And so one of the things to also think about when we try to incorporate this in the classroom is that this may be a way that when our students are having a hard time during midterms, during testing, if we can build up that gratitude beforehand. I like to think about it as a bank. We can take from that bank right about those times when stress is a little bit harder. So enhanced well-being. We also find that it enhances your positive affect and decreases your negative affect. But most importantly, what we are finding is that there are very simple gratitude interventions that can be done that end up lasting for a very long time. And so typically what we see is if we do psychological interventions, those interventions happen, we record them a couple hours, maybe a week later, another week later, and we start to see a decrease in our intervention strength, right? Or in the behaviors we were trying to elicit. With gratitude, we actually do still see an increase or decrease to a certain extent, but it's a lot more gradual and it stays a lot, and you're able a lot easier to build that back up. So if someone say is coming down a gratitude path, and we show them something that they can be grateful for, they actually increase quicker in gratitude than they would have previously, if that makes sense. So we know why now we want to do it. We know some of the things that we can do, or some of the benefits of having higher gratitude. The big question is, how do we get students to feel more grateful? Or how do we elicit this gratitude attitude, as we sometimes like to rhyme it, into our students? And so this is where my research kind of came in. And so now you guys get to deal with some really pretty stick figures. Because I went to school for psychology, not art. So what we have here on the board is we have two people. We have one person over here who would like to start a grateful act. And this person is going to receive a service or a benefit. So they're going to hopefully feel grateful. But the problem that we have here is we have this exchange. And so this is where my some of my PhD came in looking at this, was we have this exchange between the two called I call it the gratitude exchange model. And so what we've talked about a little bit here is that if we can do certain things, and we may be 100% wanting that person to feel grateful, but it goes through the lens of reality, and this person may interpret what we did a little bit different. And so what we can do as instructors, what we can do as people in general, is we can try to increase some of these activities or some of these items that go along with grateful experiences in order to help this person feel as grateful as possible. So we talked about one already. Don't add obligation. So we don't want to do the thing that I call this the motherly approach, right? Well, we did that for you, or we've gone ahead and done this. Like we talked about, don't explain why they should be grateful. If you have to explain, they're not going to be grateful. One of the other things that we can do, and this is the most important, my research and fellow psychologist research point to this, is you have to be sincere. Can't spell this either, so I'm just gonna leave that off because that was horrible. What I mean by sincere is that you actually have to mean the gratitude act that you're doing. So this comes in a couple of different ways. Number one, if you're doing something because you feel that that's what somebody who should be grateful does, people notice that and they're not going to respond as strong as you would like, right? How many times have we had somebody do something for us because out of obligation they may have done it, or because they've, we can tell when people their heart is not in that activity, right? So one of the things to talk about in your classes is if this is not something that you're into, don't try. Don't fake it. Don't pretend. Work on your own gratitude self, and then try to propose it on your students. Okay. If you are not a grateful person, and I can tell you, I talked a little bit, but when I first started with Dan Mayton, I'm not. I thought all that stuff was hooky, and was not really going to work out for people. It took me a very long time to get to a position where I feel like I'm a grateful enough person to try to explain gratitude to other people. And it was a very long journey personally before I got out there. And so the idea is that if you don't feel that you are coming from a true place, just don't do it. That doesn't mean don't be nice. It just means don't go and do something because you feel like that's what's going to make your class more grateful. Now, what we talk about is that means, on the other hand, if you truly feel like this is going to do something, it's something that you as an instructor want to do, that's when you should pull it out. So in a minute, we'll talk about some gratitude interventions. And if any of those ring more true to you as a person than any of the others, that's the one you should do. There's research out there that'll tell you some gratitude interventions are better than the others, but kind of like just showing, kind of like school, right? It only works if you show up. And so it only works if you decide to do the intervention in the first place, and then it's able to go on to do that. So don't add obligations. Make sure that it comes from a sincere place. And then the last big one that you can do is model it. And this really, when we talk about what the interventions we can do in our classrooms, this is the biggest thing that you can do, is model gratitude behavior. It's hard sometimes. Again, I'll talk to you as a parent. Why do we have to do this? Why, when kids don't want to do something, it's hard to find good reasons to come out and get them to want to do things. When we start with gratitude, that's really what we kind of have to do. If we're not the type of person that immediately starts finding things to be grateful for in a bad situation, that's one of these things when we talked about at the beginning that we have to work on. You actually have to go out and try to find the good and the bad. You have to try to find things that you can be grateful for. We talked about at the beginning, gratitude is typically comes from a person, but it can also come from a place or a thing. I've been trying to remodel a 1978 Ford F-150 pickup for about 2 years now. I just had the starter go out. I replaced the starter. I was very grateful that the starter went back in very nicely, turned it on, and now the spark plugs are all dead and I can't get a spark. But I'm still grateful that it's in a garage and I'm able to work on it in a nice air-conditioned place. And so while I was cussing at the spark plugs, I was still grateful that I was able to cuss at those spark plugs in a place that was nice and air-conditioned. And so sometimes it is working hard to kind of figure out when things are going wrong. what you can and what you can't be grateful for. And that's the model. That's where we have to start modeling that for our students. What we end up seeing over here, so those are the three kind of biggest things that we can do as a person to try to elicit gratitude in someone else. I'm going to knock that table over. What can these people do? They can be really the only thing that we can do. We can't do anything for them, but they can be prepared to receive the gratitude. So if we have primed them as our students and we have modeled good behavior of going out and looking for grateful situations and describing times in our own lives where we have been grateful, then we're priming them to get ready to receive gratitude when it comes. And so that's about the only thing that we can really do to get people ready, other than just hit them with gratitude over and over again until they're ready, right? And eventually they'll be primed and ready to go. Now we know a little bit about what gratitude is. We know a little bit about the difference between gratitude and obligation. We know some of the benefits of gratitude and obligation. We have a whole list of gratitude exercises, and I will give you a copy of this so we can get it put up online. But all these gratitude interventions really start off in one area. It's you, again, recognizing that that gratitude, or that there is you recognizing gratitude in the first place, and then you trying to get other folks to recognize that gratitude. And so the very first thing that you can do, if you have a hard time being a grateful person, or you have a hard time recognizing at the times you should be grateful, or you just have a hard time focusing on the good in the world, which a lot of us do from time to time. The very first thing, and one of the most powerful interventions that we can do in gratitude, is called journaling. Can't spell, but you know what I'm trying to do. Gratitude journaling is as simple as, at the end of the day, take 5 or 10 minutes and just think. You don't even have to write it down, though research shows if you write it down, it's more powerful. But just take 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the day and think about what today happened that I should be grateful for. Or think about, if it's hard to even go that far, what did somebody do for me today that I should have said thank you for? And you start thinking about that. You start picking out times in the day when good things happen to you because someone helped you out. For instance, here at work, how many different departments do we deal with every single day? And some of those people in those departments do not have to drop what they're doing to help us. But if they do and they help us, we should be grateful for that. And even if we've said thank you and things at that time, reflecting back on that at the end of the day strengthens that. It also allows you to recognize when those situations happen more attunely, so that you're out there are seeing them. The other great part about journaling that people forget about, if you actually write it down, when I'm having that crap day, I can go back into my journal and I can read back through days that I had really good days, and then I'm grateful for my good days, right? So we're actually starting that gratitude spiral back up again, because as we're remembering why we're grateful, we can remember that again and help us with our positive emotions. So this one is very self-motivated. This one is very, right, you do it on your own. This is one of the ones that we can bring into the classroom. Of course, this is one of those that may only be in certain subjects, right? Psychology, social work classes, you could really see this. Class here at LCSC, we had, it was drug intervention. At the beginning of every class, we did a check-in with ourselves. So we learned how to check in with our clients if we ever had to do that. But our check-ins kind of became journaling of gratitude experiences. And so if you had that ability to work that into your classroom, does not have to be every single day, but if you had the ability to do that once in a while during your classroom, you'll notice that is really, you'll notice a difference in your students. One of the things that we can also do with this, right, since we have Canvas, another really good place to journal is to discussion board. So I've had instructors in the past, put up 1 or 2 things that happened to you this week. You just kind of start moving it through there. The biggest thing about this is a habit. We have to establish this habit in order for it to actually start increasing. So the more that we can get people to do it, the more that you can do it, the better it is. This is also spot number 1. If you are having a hard time recognizing the good in your life or when you should be grateful, this is the first thing you need to start doing. It comes a lot more natural than you think. The second, and this is one of my, I think one of the most fulfilling or makes you feel the best, call them gratitude letters, okay? This is writing to somebody that has done something to you, that has helped you in the position that you are in your life, right? So this is taking 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour, and actually writing down in words why you're grateful to another person. Now, the neat thing here is that research shows two things. This helps you whether you send it or you don't send it. If you just write it down and put it off into a drawer, which I understand why people would do that, though I highly recommend not doing that, it still helps you and it helps you with your gratitude levels. If you send it, not only does it help you, but a lot of times it helps that other person, right? Because they may not have realized how big of an influence you were in their life at some point, or I'm sure as teachers we maybe have had these days. I'm having a really crappy day and a student sends me that one thank you note. I'm right back on top of it, ready to teach again, right? And so these letters can help out in a whole lot of different ways there. There are some specific rules to make these work the best. If you're going to write it to a person, you need to make sure that you address that person. So for instance, what happens here, person, is that I'm very thankful for LCSE for a lot of different reasons. I did my undergrad here. I've worked here for a very long time. My family gets to have a wonderful life because we get money from LCSE, right? But for me to write a letter to LCSE is not easy or not going to be done as well, right? But I've mentioned Dan Mayton now several times. I could write a letter to him. I could write a letter to a very specific instructor that I had, or to a specific administrator that may have helped out. I know the feelings are always this way across the board, but I love Tony Fernandez. I think he did a lot of really good things for the school. And so maybe writing to him would be one way. But we need to actually address a person. We need to specifically say why we're grateful. It can't be beaten around the bush. You can't say, thank you for being my college. Nope. What are you specifically grateful for? Dan, I'm grateful for that you were my college professor because you showed me, how to look at the world with rose-colored glasses and a different perspective. Maybe even a little bit more specific than that. That's just what I came up off the top of my head. But you actually need to say specifically why you're grateful for that. And then lastly, what it did. So you're addressing a person, you're specifically telling them what you're grateful for, and this is the change you made in my life, right? We write all of these down. Some of this is for us, some of this is for them, but a lot of times you'll find, these can get really emotional for people when they write these down, especially depending on who they're thinking about writing them to, right? And so sometimes writing these down actually unleashes feelings of gratitude that you may not have known that you had in the first place. I love these letters, and these can be used very, very well in a school activity in the teaching department, right? So they need to write their mentors. Thank you for teaching me this. Thank you for going out of your way and being my mentor. When I was in business, we talked about writing these for when they did their internships. Thank you for teaching me in my internship. Thank you for doing it this way, right? This is one of the few times, and again, I know we talked about not making people obligated to do it, but in this particular instance, this might be where you want to be like your mom. I know my mom told me to write thank you letters for every present I ever got. And I think I wrote 3 in my entire life. But this is where you can say, no, as part of your internship, it is required that you write a letter of gratitude to them. Okay, write it. I can either see it or you can send it off, but I need to know that you wrote that letter, and these are what needs to be inside of it. Well, a little bit easier, and this is, I find, sometimes a lot better. Okay, well, these work out really well in small group environments, but these are gratitude circles. Small discussions that students get into where they express gratitude or something that they have either witnessed in class or that has happened to them. You try to make it as collective as possible. In academic or in school settings, these work really, really well, like in dorms. We've actually seen some good research come out with these circles. I was not in a dorm, so I don't remember what they're called, but they're dorm floors with their RAs or whatever it is, who would lead these. They would lead these circles, and they would all talk about things that they would be grateful for. These are also really good ways to jump off difficult classes or end difficult classes. I know that, so I don't teach a lot for the business division now, but some of the classes I teach end with really, I know that today is going to be a hard math day. And so then we will end with a gratitude circle at the end to feel good about, how racking our brains against math for a little while. The big part about this is letting letting people talk with one another, because one of the things that may happen in these circles is I'm grateful for this, and someone else, it happens all the time, and it's a very cool thing when it happens. Someone will say, well, I'm grateful because someone paid for my lunch today. And someone else will be, you know what, someone bought me a Coke today, and I didn't even think about that, but I'm super grateful for that as well. And so you can actually almost see it kind of spread in these circles where one person realizes they're grateful, and you can see other people racking their brains to see if that has ever happened to them. And so again, we're kind of getting into the bottom line of what this journaling is by looking and recognizing times that we should be grateful. The biggest one that we can do as instructors is recognizing gratitude moments. This all goes back to modeling behavior. If you are in the classroom and you recognize a moment that should be that I'm grateful for this person, exaggerate, that's not the right word. Make it big, make it huge. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. Make it, thank you, exaggerate. Yes, what he just said. I'm not going to be able to say it. Make it as big and possible as you possibly can, and make it as cool as you can in front of your students. Thank you so much for bringing me that item. Oh man, it was so cool that you remembered that we had the classroom change today. Thank you. You know, make it a big deal. Show them what you mean when you say that you're grateful for somebody for doing something. If, and this is another great time too, kind of gets back onto we shouldn't tell them when they're grateful, but as instructors, this is times when we can lead it off. If you happen to be in a room or in a conversation where a gratitude moment just took place and it didn't happen, it's when you can step in and be like, hey, Sally, aren't you grateful for Johnny because he did that for you? Oh, you know, I am actually. Thanks, Johnny. Bam, start that whole moment. They now recognize that they should be able to see that and hopefully move on from there. So moments, we can actually then go all the way out and do gratitude-based products or projects. And again, these may not go in every discipline, but a lot of these sometimes take the look of gratitude letters, where you'll have, you know, think about someone who has significantly changed your life for good, and write them a letter. That's a great project to start off on. You can also write, I like this one too, gratitude-based presentations. So someone comes up and tells people something that happened to them and why they're grateful for that something. Lost my spot. You know, or anything else that's really there that can be relevant back to the course topics at hand. You know, a lot of times I remember like going back through history classes and things like that. There are times where we may be able to see where one historical person has helped out someone else. We can talk about why they should be grateful during those times. Or, you know, in reading, when we're reading between different authors who are talking amongst themselves, why should those authors be grateful for the other one? Or what could they look for, you know, to be more grateful? Adding those in and kind of having students recognize the points that they should be grateful for is, again, one of those, you know, capturing the moments and doing those journaling. We already talked about this one, but I think it should be a step on its own. Thank yous. So it's my personal belief, and actually I was so excited when I got your thank you letter for last year when we started working together. I'm horrible at it, but I think this is one of the strongest things that you can do as a person to help with gratitude in other people. Write them a thank you letter. What took you 5 seconds to write this little note and send it in the inner office mail to me? Got it the next day and was super excited to get it, right? I now like working with you even more, right? So you help build those connections between people. But these are something that's lost. Not only does this build gratitude, but when we talked back, right, to internships and things like that, how hard is it to find students interns or find places who actually want to take students in internships? It's not the easiest thing in the world. But if you had students write them thank you letters every time they came, that's going to help with their gratitude, right? Your gratitude, and it's going to just continue to build that up. And so building in these thank yous, I think, is one of the easiest things that we can do, especially since, you know, at LCSC, we're supposed to be the whole collaborative learnings, right, or putting people out in the actual environment to having them learn. And so if they interact with people out in the great world, they should discuss it, and they should be thankful for it. Gratitude discussions. These are great. And I think these can be led into almost any discussion that you are currently having with your students, almost about any topic. The discussion can be, we actually got into one discussing why two theorists who were arguing back and forth, what they were actually doing as they were arguing, right, was building their own argument off of each other's argument. And so in a way, they actually should be grateful for one another, because without this person, I couldn't get my argument to where it is today. And so having discussions about, when should these people feel grateful, or when would be a good time to feel gratitude, or even starting at something simple as, did something, during this event, during this time, what good happened versus all the bad that happened? Do you think anybody was grateful that this good happened? Just trying to kind of, again, recognize and define. This is my favorite one. This really 100% leans into, you're not supposed to say you owe me, but I think we get away with it on this one. Gratitude challenges, okay? Organize a gratitude challenge and challenge groups of students to define kindness, show gratitude, do good things in different ways, right? This works out really well for clubs and organizations. We had talked a long time ago, I was a member of Active Minds, about doing some type of giveaway where whatever club could generate the most good, right? Which is kind of hard to quantify, but you would, maybe see some advantages or get something back from that, maybe get money to your club account, but actually getting people out there and saying, I challenge you to do something nice for somebody today. And not only that, I want you to do something nice. I want you to report to me that you did something nice, and I want you to tell me how you felt about that. This is a very strong place for people who maybe don't do nice things very often. And we all do nice things, whether we want to admit it or not. But I can remember myself back in undergrad, this is where it kind of started for me, is actually recognizing the nice things that I did for people, and then seeing that, oh, nice things affect people. Oh, I like it when nice things happen to me too. And you kind of start to build on that and move yourself up, right? So challenging people in the first place to go do something nice, go out there and do something great. We do this all the time too, just to kind of, this is not a new creation, this gratitude challenge. Think about all the sports teams that go out there and do good things for their communities. Not all the time are they the one, basketball players, and we want to go do this. So their coach is saying, we're going to go and do this, and y'all are going to come with me, right? Or like the welders who just built all the benches on our pier, or on the docks over here. They maybe necessarily didn't want to do that. Their instructors kind of hinted that, or egged them on, and they went out there and did that. But now they're doing nice things. I'm very grateful for those benches because I walk the dikes a whole lot, so I get to sit on them once in a while, right? And so kind of egging people on to do those nice things is the way to maybe start if they don't know where to begin, or if they are a little bit apprehensive to the gratitude idea. The last one, I got two more here. So gratitude-based speakers. So this is having somebody in, and this is not someone like me who comes in and says, this is what gratitude is academically. This is someone who can come in and tell a really good story about a time that their life was changed by someone else, and they were grateful for it, right? These are impact speakers. These are not academic speakers. These are the ones who are going to come in and give a part of their life story that will show, I was down and out and I could have been destroyed, but this person came out, they helped me, and this is where we're at. Though you can have, since we are academic, I'm happy to come and talk to any of your classes about gratitude, but typically we find more impact if we're trying to build gratitude from impact speakers versus academic speakers. And then lastly, gratitude rituals. And this again is probably one of the biggest things that you guys as instructors can do. It starts off very simply. Try to say hi to every student as they walk through the door. I know it's hard. I've tried to do it. You don't always get them, but try. Try to make those meaningful connections with students as they walk through the door, right? Try to figure out ways that maybe you can, I'm not advocating to help them out, but maybe find, or give them money or things like that, but advocate for ways maybe you can help with their learning styles, or, adjust to their learning preferences in that way. Saying hi, starting every class or every Tuesday class or whatever you want to do with a gratitude circle or with a gratitude, intervention at the very beginning. One of the things that happens with gratitude interventions is people, when they first start them, think they're silly, dumb, and they're not going to work. But what we find more and more is that as you ritualize it, people actually then will say, well, we didn't do our gratitude exercise today, right? Or, I kind of miss the fact that we're not doing these anymore. And so people actually really like to feel good about themselves and feel good about the world. We just have to force them into it a lot of times, right? So ritualizing these, having people, or having activities that you do in a class having discussions. There is one of the instructors that I followed, or one of the researchers that I followed, to the point that people who took his class knew that they were going to have gratitude, like that somehow this class about statistics was still going to have gratitude worked into it somehow. And so becoming the gratitude instructor is part of that ritual too. Just, you know, being out there and being modeling to people what you're supposed to do. I'll have them put this up on the CTL. But the biggest thing, and this is the one at the bottom, is remember to model attitude as an instructor by expressing your appreciation for your students' efforts and contributions. By actively integrating these techniques into your teaching methods, you can help create a more positive and appreciative learning environment that benefits both you and your students. And so I've gotten some questions sometimes like, how do I even start this? Easy. Did all of your students turn in their assignments on time this week? If that answer is yes, thank them for that. Guys, thank you so much for getting your assignments turned in this week. You know that I have to grade them. And when people don't have it, I mean, this is the way I grade papers. It's not everyone does. But I grade all my papers at the same time. And so when Johnny didn't turn his paper in late, it stops me from grading everybody's papers, right? So the fact that you guys all have your papers turned in at the same time, I'm grateful for that. I get my job done quicker. And you guys are going to be grateful because you're going to get your grades faster, right? Super quick way just to say thankful and I'm appreciative. Another really easy way, did everybody show up to class on time? Guys, thanks to everybody for showing up on class on time. I talk a lot, and that 5 minutes that you guys don't show up on time kills my productivity, right? So the fact that I can just go in and start teaching is great to me. Another one, thank you for not putting away all of your books and bags 5 minutes before class stops, right? And that's another time that you can check in with them. I see you guys are doing that. It would really be great for me if we could just hold off on doing that. And and to show that I'm grateful for that too, I'm going to give you guys the minute before class gets out to do it, right? Whether you remember to or not is secondary, but building up those things where you can say and actively model to them that you are grateful for the things that are happening in your classroom or in your environment. I mean, thank you for showing up to my office hours on time. Thank you for doing this. Thank you. You know, these little tiny things that sometimes students actually don't hear thankful for, or being praised and thanked enough for, may also then trigger that in them as well. And so modeling that behavior for them, recognizing times where we should be grateful or where we can be grateful, and then helping other people recognize those times as well. That's really how we build gratitude, and that's really how we start to see it in other people. Lastly, again, to go all the way back to the very beginning of this talk, this is not something that happens overnight. Even if you are a very happy and grateful person, it takes a while to be able to recognize those times that are happening and when you should be grateful. It even takes more time to, when you're sad, to figure out time to bring yourself back up by thinking about times that when you're grateful for them. And so just like working out and just like going to the gym and pumping iron, gratitude journals, thank you notes, all of those things are something that needs to be done by you and hopefully by your students in order to build up that gratitude. If you don't do it, I'm not going to do it. You're just going to hear lectures about it over and over again. So got 10 minutes left. Questions, thoughts, comments? Awed you guys into silence. That happens a lot. Yes, ma'am.
Could you say just a little bit more about the gratitude circles? Like, so if I'm doing that in class and I want to connect it to some of the content, would that be a way to do that?
Yeah. It's hard for me to come with the top of my head, but like one of the things I have worked on, and one of the things we did for a research experiment is we had them read through and I don't remember if it was Huckleberry Finn or if it was Tom Sawyer. We had them read through one of those passages in the book of when there was gratitude exchange going on, and have them talk about it, right? If you were reading that book or books like that in your class, that's those gratitude circles. They don't have to be about what's going on in their lives necessarily. It's just recognizing that this was a moment that someone should have been grateful, and why should they have been grateful for that moment? And that, I think, works just as well in a gratitude circle as not. If you can relate it back to something, well, has anyone ever done that for you? Then that makes them start doing the internal reflection and thinking about, oh, I am a lot happier doing nicer things for me than I thought, so. Yeah.
Is it better to do that in small groups, or would you do it with the whole class if you had a class of 12 or something?
The thing that always gets me, and this is one of those ones that you kind of have to judge it with your own instructorness, right? With your own grateful or your own ability as a teacher is sometimes, and when the right class, it works great with the full class, right? If you've got a really good class that's all talking and they're all in there, that's wonderful. But we also know that we have those classes that one or two people can throw the whole thing off. So I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it if there's too many detractors in the room. I do think small groups help out more because you get more of that interpersonal connection. And so when people have those aha moments, like you see them, at least I have a lot more in small groups, like 3 to 5 people versus, 20 or 30. You do still see them in those big groups, but it's really when people are connecting and, oh, someone did that for me too. That's awesome, and kind of building that up. So any other questions?
Do you see acts of kindness as the same as acts of gratitude?
Only if, then it comes back to the definition of gratitude, only if your act of kindness has cost you something, I've recognized it and it's helped me. Those are the kind of the 3 things that make it a gratitude act, right? Is you actually, it has to cost you something, whether that's time, money, effort, breath. I have to recognize that it cost you, and it's not recognize that you did the act. I have to recognize the cost to you. And I have to be grateful that you spent that on me. So yes, as long as all of those are in there, then it's an attitude grat. But I would say that probably every act of gratitude starts with an act of kindness. It's just whether or not we interpret it as gratitude, or that we receive or give gratitude back is what it is. So
could start with an act of correction, which could be positive or negatively skewed. So
right, but even an act of correction sometimes could be an act of kindness. If I've done my assignment wrong for the last 20 times and no other professor has ever told me this, very good example. This happened to me in statistics, right? I had a student or a professor that taught me the equation for standard deviation. I did it the right way. I did not know you could compartmentalize that until I got to grad school. Oh my God, it's so much better when you do it that way, right? So they corrected me. They actually made fun of me when I did it the first time, but I'm grateful that they did it that way. And so, yes, it can kind of skew both ways, but that's why it's more, I don't have my people up. It's so important. That's the person, how they interpret that. Yeah. And that's what becomes so hard with gratitude, is that we can't, I guess I should stop that. That's what's so hard in gratitude research, is I can't tell what makes people decide whether or not this same act they got this time they're grateful for, and they got that same act a week later and they don't show any emotion towards it, right? So, yeah.
When it comes to, when you say correction, I teach over at the prison at Orfeo.
Sure.
And the students are in all of their emails, thank you for replying to my email, thank you for giving me comment. I mean, to the point that I'm almost embarrassed to the fact that they're so appreciative of the work. And so it was interesting how when you were talking about this, I was thinking about how the Orofino's facility, the climate at the facility obviously encourages the inmates to be appreciative and to show that appreciation, because I see it
Right.
on an almost daily basis in the emails that they send to me. And I thought that was somebody brought up corrections. I'm like, oh, in the big picture, department corrections.
If you think about that too, right? You were giving them time. They're a lot more cognizant of that because time is all they have, right? In corrections, right? And so
lots of
the other side of that, and this is just in the side as the researcher in me. So we at Workforce are doing the welding program out there, right? And we get the same thing. They've been so grateful. When this all started, my thought was, as a research experiment, how long will that last before it becomes commonplace? So the fact that LC is there providing them education is new and bright and shiny, and they're very thankful for it. But in 3 or 4 years, if we've still been providing this education, are we still going to see emails like that, or has it become commonplace? Because when we look at gratitude, what ends up happening, it comes back to my door opening example, right? Everybody opens the door for everybody. We're not grateful for it anymore. In fact, it becomes an expectation, not a grateful thing, right? And so that was my idea, is at what point does it become, we're thankful to, now we expect you to go to the prisons, right? So yeah, anyways, that's my research aside. But
again, it comes back to that idea of the receiver, because I have had several experiences where I opened the door out of habitual training,
right,
where I was rebuked for doing so.
Right.
So, I mean, it then makes me make a conscious decision whether or not that's something I would choose to do for the next person, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that goes back to the idea of not everything you do that you think may be something that someone should express gratitude. They may not, because they may not receive it as a helpful act, right? I'm sure we've all been in relationships and or married, and sometimes we think we're helping our spouses and significant others out, and they let us know in not too many words that was not helpful, right? So same thought.
I have an experience from this morning. I took a a big coffee table to like Goodwill, or that's not it, but and there was a man unloading his truck, and the employee came out to help me take the coffee table out of the back of the truck, and the other guy stopped what he was doing and came over and said, can I help you guys? And I was like, oh no, thank you so much. And I thought, wow, that's so sweet. And then the employee, we started to get it out of the truck together, and then he took it by himself, and I had this look of surprise on my face at how strong he was, and then he was very grateful that I was impressed by his strength. So we were just gratituding all over the place today.
Everywhere. And you know, when you start looking for it, that's one of those great experiences. When you start looking for it, that's that upward spiral that you start seeing, right? That if you start looking for things to be grateful for, you find them more easy than you would think. And if you can express that to other people, they see it, you become happy, they become happy, we all become happy, and it goes up until we have a bad day, and then it comes crashing back down. But then we have gratitude to help build us back up. So,
Well, when you were talking about obligation, it reminded me there was a Big Bang Theory episode. I think it was a Christmas episode, but there's several places throughout the series where Sheldon talks about reciprocity.
yep.
And the initial episode is a Christmas episode where Penny makes the mistake of giving a gift for Christmas, or revealing that she has gifts for her neighbors. And Sheldon's response is, you haven't given me a gift, you've given me an obligation.
And he has to go out and find all, like he has like 4 or 5 different gifts to give her back or
Well,
something.
yeah, it's funny because he goes to like the Bath and Body Works
Right.
shop and buys like every gift basket they have in the store that they've made up for Christmas, because he doesn't know the equivalent value of the gift. And what she's done is it's like the silly thing. She was a waitress at a restaurant and got an autograph of Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
And so she gives him this napkin and he looks at it and it's priceless to him. And so he comes out back and brings all these gifts, and then he decides that's not enough and he gives her a hug.
And that's priceless to her, right? I remember, yeah.
Because he's not
touchy.
distances and doesn't like to touch people. So
I actually used that example in my dissertation of what obligation looks like. I was like, I know this is not real, but this right here is the social contract and where obligation can come from, right?
Yeah.
And so and that's the other thing that goes back to even all in the eye of the beholder, because obligation and gratitude are so close. You could be giving somebody without any want to get something back. I have a friend of mine who went out to lunch all the time, and it started off as just being lunch, but now was it your turn to buy or my turn to buy, right? And it doesn't matter. I'll buy her lunch. She can buy me lunch. No one actually cares, but we've worked into that obligation of, right, now we've got that social contract that we have to repay each other. So it's a very slippery slope. That was, if I would have gotten into faculty, that's actually where my next line of research was going to look at the difference between, like, how can we, so I looked at this side, right? How can I give out meaning to make you feel more grateful, or how can I express that I'm trying to get you to feel grateful? The other side I was going to look at is how do I, as the receivers, what makes me look at something obligated versus a gratitude, right? So, but now I work for Workforce, and so I don't research as much as I'd like. Anything else? Well, I am very grateful that you guys all showed up today. We were just talking that there might not be very many people. I love having these small group discussions, and so I'm very happy and grateful that you guys decided to spend your lunch with me. On that note too, if you guys are ever working on classroom assignments where you're wondering about how can I add this a little bit more, I'm more than happy to read over them or brainstorm with you, or go over, no, I think this might look this way, no, I think this might look that way. Did clearly a lot of research into gratitude, and so a lot of the stuff we can kind of look at and maybe tweak a little bit to make it come across the way that you're wanting it to come across. And then then we put it out there and see if it's expressed that, or if it gets received that way, and then we make changes if we need to. So more than happy. If you guys don't know my email, just look up Workforce Training. My picture's out there. You can find me. More than happy to talk with any of you guys offline about that as well. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you for presenting.